Hi, Reneau. Thank you so much for joining me this podcast episode. Really appreciate it. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine to have you in the show.
Mm.
So, yeah, super excited to learn more about yourself. And also, we're gonna discuss today, which is like anger. A lot of
Mhm.
people struggling with it, don't know how to manage the anger, and they don't know how they be so angry most of the time. So, I'd love to cover that. And before we jump into that, I'd love to know more about yourself. How did you become a coach yourself?
Well, it's a long story, but the short of it is I was a marriage family therapist specializing in anxiety disorders
Mhm.
for 20 years. And, working with those clients, you get to know their family and their spouses and stuff. And so that's how I got into the anger side of it. Then I retired from that and taught at a college for a while. And then now I'm fully retired, but I still write and I still
Yeah,
talk and do speeches and that type of stuff. So and, these types of programs, which are a lot of fun.
yeah, that's great. So yeah, like with your experiences, you worked with so many people in the past, like how anger works and how to like control it or manage it with it. So what actually happens? Like how does anger comes? Like some people get more, some people get less. How the whole thing is starts.
Right. There's several parts to this answer. And of course, we got so much anger going on nowadays,
Yeah.
especially in the US with all the political extremism on both sides that are going on. But anger is a response to a threat. Okay,
Mhm.
when you're feeling threatened, you have two responses: fear or anger. And when I use those words, I'm using them in a very broad sense. So fear can range from just apprehension or being a little nervous to panic.
Yeah.
Anger can range from irritation to rage. And there are actually two different circuits in the brain that deal with threat. Again, the fear and the anger circuit. And how you respond has a lot to do with your childhood training. There's a wiring side to it. People have different personalities. Some are just a little bit more volatile than others. Although one of the big myths for people that are explosive is they'll say, I can't help it. That's just the way I am. And except for a very small, little tiny percentage of people that have some brain problems and stuff, that's not true. Uh, and adults can manage their emotions if they choose to and if they practice it.
Yeah.
In fact, people that are explosive, they won't do that if they're in front of a police officer or they're at court or they're in front of their boss. They'll tend to explode around people that where it's quote safe, right? There's minimal
Mhm.
consequences. And of course, the downside of that is they'll also minimize, their anger, and well, it's not that big a deal, so I blow up once in a while. And yet, what they find is they tend to be lonely people because nobody wants to be around them.
Yeah.
So anger is a response to a threat. And if I have somebody like a couple where one person, whether it's the woman or the man, who tends to be explosive, the first thing I'll have them lock into place is what we call a walkaway strategy. And for generally speaking, that's good. If you look at people who manage their emotions well, one of the things they do when strong emotions come up is they stop and they
Yeah.
regain control of the part of their frontal lobes. Because what happens is those deeper emotional circuits have kind of taken over because of something that's cued it. And so you have to stop a minute and let your thinking part of your brain kind of get control over that again and start to decide, what do I want to do with that? So it might be useful to talk about appropriate and inappropriate anger too, because emotions are appropriate if there's a real reason for them. For example, in
Yeah.
anger, if there's a real threat, and if you're doing something that's going to minimize that threat with the least amount of harm to yourself and others, then probably you're right. So if you're getting angry and there's really not a rational reason for it, uh, then you want to take a look at that. And of course, one of the problems nowadays is we have people are so irrational that there's a lot of irrational thinking going on. People become very extreme and black and white in their thinking, and that's going to trigger a lot of anger. So
Yeah.
dialing back and taking a look at, is what I'm doing reasonable or not? And is the actions I'm taking reasonable for managing that, whatever it is the threat
Mhm.
is. Uh, and it's a big question. For example, there's something called should must thinking, which you may have had somebody prior talk about, where people have a lot of rules about the way things should and must be. And so when that rule gets violated, then they get angry, right, or fearful if they're wired that way
Yeah.
or trained that way. And one other thing I might mention is that uh, if you had a parent who tended to be explosive and act out their anger, oftentimes that's where you pick that up from. Again, you just model
Right.
off your parents. I've learned I need to be tough and I need to go out there and
Yeah.
just, uh, bang heads together and get what I want. Then that's the behavior you'll learn. And I should also mention that sometimes it's a survival thing. If you grow up in a really rough culture or a rough neighborhood and you get a reputation, you get in my face and you're going to be sorry,
Mm.
and you can, do that. That's got a lot of benefit for you, especially like in a gang culture or something like that. So, anger is all about control and it's eliminating threat. And in a lot of people, it has to do with control. You see that in relationships. You can control a person with anger, especially if they tend to be a non assertive person or a non assertive situation. So that's kind of the positive and negative of it. Again, in controlling it, part of it has to do with looking at your behaviors. Do you stop and regain control of yourself? And then the second thing is taking a look at some of those belief systems that are generating your anger. For example, a person who needs to be in control, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it's very common for a person like that. Okay, I'm working. I know what I'm doing. I'm really sharp. Okay, I'm working on the car. Oh, I got a part left over. Okay,
Mhm.
you know, enter the wife, the kid. Hey, how's it going? I'm feeling helpless and weak. And so I will convert that to anger because at least now I have adrenaline going through my body. I feel strong, right? Doesn't
Yeah.
do any good, but at least I don't feel weak or helpless anymore. So you see that happen a lot with some people too, especially when they're out of control or they have emotions that are not okay for them. They'll use anger as a covering emotion. So that sometimes is done too.
Yeah. And a lot of people like they show the anger and like especially like where they can be authority on the like they're not gonna show the anger on their boss if they're gonna be fired from the job or like their clients or like you mentioned like a policeman or something like they're gonna show where the soft side is like probably their spouse or people like they have like authority and they show the anger in there. So in terms of like managing them kind of anger like you said like that can be trained and like you can control your emotion in order to get that. So what
Mm-hmm.
is like a step-by-step formula like what you use and help your clients to manage them client the anger moments?
Well, and like I said, and let me mention that unfortunately, people that have explosive anger a lot of times don't recognize it as a problem
Okay.
until it has a negative consequence. They get
Yeah.
fired, the police become involved, something like that.
Mm.
So I think the first step, again, and again, we're way out on the extreme anger here when we're talking about explosive people. The walk away strategy is important for people that are more in the normal range. I think just practicing that idea of, okay, if I'm upset, if I'm angry, I need to stop a moment and dial it back and let my conscious mind take a look at what's going on.
Mm.
And then the second thing is there a real threat? And what is that threat? And a lot of times that's hard for people to um, identify. And so sometimes that takes some time. Is it a real threat because I might lose my job or my kids in danger
Yeah.
or something of that nature? Or is it has to do with my self-esteem, my status, something of that nature? Again, we just went through election here, and a lot of people are really threatened if the other party gets in power and mine loses and that sort of thing, and
Yeah.
they don't take a longer historical perspective of things. So, where is the threat coming from, and can I actually do something to minimize that threat that would be
Mm.
reasonable for most normal everyday things? And again, when we talk about anger. It's something that comes up all the time, and there's something called assertive behavior, and for most of the normal types of things that come up, the solution, if it's real threat, is some kind of assertive action. Because whenever you tell somebody, you're stepping on my toes, I need you to back off, there's actually a low level of anger that's generating that behavior. Anger gives you energy and motivation. And that's another thing is if you can tune into things at an early stage, then you'll tend to be more rational in your reaction to it. I mean, I've had people sitting in the office and they're ripping off the arms of their chair, and I'll say, "So you seem angry about that?" And no, 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 I'm just fine, right?
Mm.
So if things are bothering you, being able to tune into that early on and deciding what you want to do at that time. It's kind of like with parenting, right?
Yeah.
You've got a kid, and okay, I told you not to do that. I told you not to do that. How many times I have to, at some point you have what we call an action point.
Yeah.
And so, like with parenting, if you can dial that action point down to the very beginning, you'll do something that's reasonable. If you sit on it and let it build over time, then you tend to do stuff that's unreasonable. Uh, so I think maybe to recap all of that, number one is getting in touch with your emotions so that you know when you're angry.
Yeah.
And then when that's happening, you identify, why am I angry? Where's the threat here? What is it in me that's being threatened? Is it something outside that's true and real, or is it something inside in terms of my belief systems or my view of myself, or maybe a relationship issue? My spouse is not showing me the respect or the love that I want, and in that case, I need to speak up and take some action about that.
Yeah. So you're following them kind of steps. Like a lot of people got other issues, they, like you said, like they don't want to acknowledge it, like they don't
Mhm.
want to say like I have that anger problem or anything like that. They deny it totally. And yeah, with like they're gonna argue with you like for no reason, and everything you talk about, like they're gonna be really really pissed off in terms of like what they're actually saying.
Sure.
So if someone's have, we know, like our listeners listening, if they know someone like that and who doesn't want to acknowledge it, how can someone can actually help them in a way? Like you need to get some help.
Well, first, you have to have a relationship with a person. Most people are not willing to accept help from somebody they don't have a relationship with. So you need to
Yeah.
be able to speak into their life, right? So most of the time, there's not a whole lot you can do. But if it's like a family member or a good friend or something like that, and they're willing to talk about it, then you can just share some of the ideas like what we're talking about here.
Mm.
I mean, like I have audiobooks on anger available and things of that nature, and there's a number of things that people can read. Um, one of the things, just kind of go back to something we said, people that are out of touch with stuff inside of themselves, uh, going back and thinking about times when I was angry or when I was frightened or sad, what was my behavior at that time? And everybody
Right.
has some time in their life where they definitely know, well, I was angry at that, or I was sad about that, or I was fearful about that. So
Yeah.
you'll do something, and it's a lot of times when you can identify, these are the behaviors I do when I'm angry, these are the behaviors I do when I'm sad, these are the behaviors I do when I'm frightened. You see yourself doing that and you say, well, gee, I seem to be sad. What's going on? I don't know. Well, let's see, my best friend just moved away. Oh, okay, I got it. Or I'm doing my anger behavior, and so you start going through the last day or two. So what's going on that might have triggered that?
Mm.
Oh, that's what I need to take care of. So you kind of work backwards from your behavior into what's going on inside, and that's the way to kind of reconnect with your emotional network and to make it okay to be angry. I mean, if you grew up in a family where if I spoke up, you got smacked around, then you learn to suppress all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes, or if you live in a family where again it's very a lot of anger going on, and you start to model that, because kids can go either way, right? They can suppress or they can model it. Then sometimes doing a little bit of work, just looking at, okay, where did I learn this behavior from? Is it appropriate? And then decide, okay, what am I going to substitute? Again, to go back to the parenting example, you'll do what your parents did unless you've actually decided what you're going to do differently and you
Yeah.
practice it. Otherwise, you're going to be there standing just like your mom or dad, right? And the same thing in a spousal relationship. We tend to, with our mates, do the behaviors that our parents did. It's really interesting how people in courtship are different from when they start to settle down, right? Because
Mm.
when you start to settle down, that opposite sex parent starts to come in to the household. So if you're a guy, go
Yeah.
look at the gal's mom, right? Or if you're a gal, go look at the guy's dad if you can, or learn about them, because they're going to move in sooner or later to some degree.
Yeah. And I have like a two example for you. Like if you can explain to like what two scenario you have and what you can do, that'll be great help for like our audience to understand more. So I'm giving you like a one scenario, which is one person is like driving with a family, probably on a highway, and there is like a big traffic, and the kids are screaming, and everything's going on, probably been like hours in stuck in the traffic. and everything is pissing you off, your spouse, your kids, and everything. On obviously, you don't know how long you're gonna get out from the highway because of there is an accident or something,
Right.
and you are getting so much anger on yourself. How do you get out of that scenario? So for a person like that, like what they can actually do in terms of that situation.
And some of this is kind of and behavior like that is probably habitual behavior. Okay,
Mm,
that's something that they get really upset about traffic all the time anyway.
yeah,
And and a lot of times they have a lot again these should must rules. You know, I have to be on time. I have to do this. I have to do that, and kind of take a looking at the that idea that there's nothing you have to do in life. You know, people will say, "Wait a minute, I got to pay taxes, or you got to do this or that." No, you don't have to. There's consequences.
yeah,
Life is a series of choices, and I choose to do things. So, first of all, get into that idea that, you know, things are going to come up in life that are going to disappoint to what I would like, the way I would like things to be. Because I always tell people instead of saying I have to or I must, say I choose or I want. So, I want to be on time. I would like my kids to be quiet. Uh, so that's part of it. The other part is planning ahead. I mean, the scenario you talked about with kids and wife and all that, uh, some planning ahead helps with that, depending upon the ages of the kids and stuff, so that you have toys, you have food, you know, all that
yeah,
type of stuff that you can distract them with. Uh, Sometimes, if it's an issue between you and your mate, where you tend to have this angry exchange anyway, when you get upset, again, that's a habitual behavior, right? So you're
right.
probably not going to do a whole lot right at that moment, but that's a signal that I need to maybe start to work on managing that. And so
Mm,
that might be a conversation with your mate, maybe even that you need to go and talk to somebody so you guys can learn how to fight fair, how you can express what's going on with you. Because again, a
yeah,
lot of times people, what they're angry about, they're fighting is not the real issue. It's interesting. You'll sit with a couple
yeah,
and one person says, "You know, I can't stand it when this person does this." And so you say, "So what do you want in that situation?" Well, and then they do this, and I hate it. So what do you want in that situation? And you can go on for 15, 20 minutes before they finally focus on what they want. And I think that's important. And it may be that in that situation, he would like the mate to maybe take a more active role in distracting the kids. And maybe that there's something going on at work, you know,
yeah,
and this is just an expression of that frustration. So again, at that moment, the best thing you can do is just kind of you can't leave the car, right? But
no,
you can just maybe decide, okay, I'm going to just accept the fact that things are chaotic, and I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to take a look at this later on. You know, turn on the music or whatever, and let the kids just do what they're thing. Now, I'm pretty good at ignoring that type of stuff. Some people have a hard time,
yeah, yeah,
but again, it's a signal that you need to practice some behaviors. You need to practice some ways of getting more in tune with yourself.
yeah. Another scenario, like I said, I'm gonna have the two scenario. Another scenario, let's say you work in a business, or probably one of them client, you owe them money or something, like they need to pay the invoice, and they didn't pay, and you've done all of the work. Now you have like a couple of choices: be really angry at them, and like do what you need to do in terms of like, or like how they can stay focused or like calm down in the moment, because that's probably a lot of money for like some people, and they didn't
Mhm.
get the paid, or like you have like you can ruin them in a social media, you can expose them or things like that. When you're angry, you can do something, or you're gonna write a bad email or like a text, whatever the case. When angry, we make mistake. In case like if you're in that position, what would be done?
Well, if you're dealing with an angry person, the first thing you do is you listen and you reflect back what's going on.
Mm,
My brother had a really interesting job. He got hired by a company that had really messed up their supply chain,
yeah,
and they lost a lot of customers. And he's in the sales, and he was hired in order to repair these things. And he
right.
would go into these CEOs, and they'd be just yelling at him. And he'd just sit there and say, "Yeah, you know, we really messed up there. Yeah, I can see where that was a problem for you." You know, and after listening for a while, that calms them down, because people that are high emotion, when you listen to them and reflect back what their concerns are, it
Mm,
calms them down. Then you can switch to what you want. And I think it's very important that you have that clearly in mind. The formula I used to do is a DER formula: describe, express, and request.
yeah,
So you describe emotions, if appropriate, in business, not so much. And then excuse me, you describe the situation, then you express the emotions. You can skip that in business most of the time.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with a personal relationship, sometimes saying, I'm disappointed or I'm sad or whatever, and then you make your request. And that's the part, again, a lot of times people don't. And again, with somebody owing you money, it's pretty straightforward. You have a series, it's kind of like when you fire somebody, right? You have the verbal reprimand, you have the written reprimand, then you take some kind of action. And so with customers, it's the same thing. And the more you can be just like a robot or something, not get into all the emotional stuff, the accusations, because that's what happens. People say,
Mm.
well, you're just such a deadbeat. I don't even know why I got you. You just needs you bought this thing and you owe this amount of money and it's due such and such. And these are the consequences I need to go to next if it doesn't get paid. And you just stay focused on that. And if they start giving you all these examples about, well, they'll distract you. Well, but I
Yeah.
got sick and then this happened. And then you listen for a moment. Yeah, that's real tough. I remember a time when that happened to me. But again, you owe this money and it's due, and you come back to that request. So periodically, when they distract you, you
Yeah.
stop, listen to them, you just acknowledge it. Because again, people are not willing to engage until you've acknowledged what's going on with them. So you
Mm.
acknowledge
Right.
it, then you come back to that request. But this is due on the 15th, and it's going to be overdue at that time. And that's when we're going to be putting penalties on and possibly moving it to collections. Um, and you just, again, keep reflecting that. And maybe you got a way to negotiate where they can do a partial payment or something. If that's a
Yeah.
possibility for your company, you do that well. But until you've heard what they're saying and you acknowledge it, they're not willing to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for that sharing. So yeah, really, we're coming to the end of this podcast. So it's been a
Mhm.
great conversation with you on the anger. So I learned so many things from you. I hope my listeners got some value from it as well. So if anyone interested to learn more about you, your program, your business, where's the best place to find you?
Easiest place to find everything is Why Emotions. That's whyemotions.com. And they're linked to YouTube videos that I have and some interviews and some, blogging that I do and all that type of stuff. In fact, I just redid the website. So it's all brand new, got some new stuff up on it. It's got some download things, some relaxation response things that people can download. So yeah,
Yeah.
whyemotions.com.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today and coming to the show. Yeah, it's been a great pleasure having you. And yeah, thanks for coming. I wish you best of luck with your business and your personal life as well.
Well, thank you. It's been a delight.
Yeah, thank you. So that's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. I hope you got some value from it. Those who's listening, if anyone interested to go visit Aruni's website and if you want to work with him or learn more about his stuff. So until then, I'll talk to you in the next episode. Take care.